Hello again and welcome to another edition of Media Watch. I'm your co-host Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony.
And I'm Raymond Peterson.
Brought to you by the good graces of Manhattan Neighborhood Network and EVT Educational Productions. And we are pre-taping a Thursday before our Monday air date. And guess what? We're pre-taping on the 1st of February. It's a new month, folks.
Mm-hmm.
So the biggest stuff in the news, of course, you had a congressional train wreck. You have a congressional committee memo, and then another congressional committee memo, and basically it all ties to the ongoing big elephant that we predicted was still going to be the main story of 2018, the Russia investigation.
Right.
And there are people who are being accused of all kinds of things in the FBI and maybe getting fired or not getting fired. So where do we want to start, guys?
Well, I want to start with this thing. This memo thing has become so convoluted. I'm forgetting the genesis of it. I mean, originally the GOP hired this agent to gather dirt on what?
Oh, no. You're going back to the dossier, but the dossier does play a part in the memo.
Well, that's where it all started, isn't it?
Well, it really all started with the day Devin Nunes, the Republican head of the House Intelligence Committee, did his nighttime venture down to the White House to give the White House information. This is way back in 2017, correct?
Okay.
That he had this new information that was going to blow the top off of the supposed Russia investigation. And it turns out it was documents that the White House had given him that he was then taking back down. And it was such a pat put-up job that he was called upon to recuse himself from being head of the House Intelligence Committee. That's where this stuff all started, if you want to go back to that. But Bob, you want to bring us up to the latest iteration of Devin Nunes and that fiasco?
I'm still catching up to it. I mean, the latest memo that's being considered, but I guess it's in the White House, being looked at by the White House currently.
Okay.
And it's being supposedly reviewed by the Intelligence Committee as well.
Right.
And I mean, we have a memo relating to the Russian investigation. We don't know what it says at this point because we're waiting for release.
The ABCs, basically.
Yes.
Devin Nunes and House members went to the Intelligence Committee and asked the FBI to give them classified documents because they were suspicioning that there was a cabal in the FBI that was anti-Trump.
Right. This is a consistent story.
Okay, right. And so they got information to try to figure out who in the Intelligence Committee and the FBI were behind the investigation of the Trump collaboration, possible Russian influence, etc.
Right.
The Intelligence Committee actually gave Nunes and his people, and I believe it was his staff members, because basically he was supposedly recusing himself from this whole Russia investigation, House Intelligence Committee oversight. And after he got that stuff, they basically took the information and cherry-picked it to where they could actually come up with a storyline that proved that there was an anti-Trump cabal in the FBI and in the intelligence community. Now, this is based on intelligence information that was handed over to them. Now, the intelligence information went further back than the infamous Steele dossier. It went back to the fact that the FBI had gotten FISA warrants to take a look into one of the Trump advisors by the name of Carter Page, because they had come across his name while they were monitoring Russian operatives.
Right.
And Russian operatives were in discussions, and the name Carter Page came up as someone that was in a particular circle that they could talk to and would be, et cetera, et cetera. And lo and behold, he actually did make some trips to Russia and the whole. So before the Steele dossier ever got into the hands of the FBI, based on intelligence intercepts, had already been looking into Carter Page. But when the dossier came up, the infamous Steele dossier that said the Russians had compromising stuff on Donald Trump, that people in the Trump administration, the Trump transition team, the Trump campaign were colludable, willing to collude, as you see from the Trump Jr. emails. Oh, dirt, yeah, I love it. If it's what I think it is, especially later, all that historical stuff. This handcrafted 4-page memo that Devin Nunes and his staff came up with was to try to sidetrack the previous investigation, try to throw dirt on the dossier that actually, never mind the salacious stuff, all the other stuff about possible collusion turned out to be correct. And so they've been trying their best to undercut and undermine that investigation. Now, when the Democrats on the House committee got wind of the fact that these guys were cherry picking their own stuff from the intelligence community, they sat down and said, okay, we have to have something that actually tells what this intelligence intercept was, that actually gives the full story. And so they crafted another memo themselves. Now, when the FBI learned that Chairman Nunes was going to release this stuff, first of all, he was supposed to just show it to members of the intelligence community in his committee. He took it and showed it to the entire House, which was against the agreement he had with FBI intelligence sources, etc.
And just to be sure, of course the House is vetted, but not everybody has that high clearance of the intelligence committee.
No. He'd already broke protocol by showing it to the whole House.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. They have a certain level of security clearance, but not the level to be.
Yes.
Just want to make that clear.
No, so he already barged through that door. All right, and now having done that, and the entire House going, what is this nonsense? What are you trying to do? Why are you trying to release this to the general public? Because this could be detrimental. Intelligence community says, no, don't do this. FBI, Justice Department, DOJ, the current Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, went to the White House to ask that Trump not listen to Paul Ryan, who's saying, yes, release the Devin Nunes 4-page memo that supposedly takes the onus off the collusion and supposedly talks about a cabal trying to, from political reasons or for political reasons, skew the investigation into this collusion. And so because the intelligence DOJ, based on what the intelligence community has said, don't release this stuff. You could be putting our process, our procedures, and people at risk if you do that. But because it supposedly helps clears the Trump organization and the White House from any collusion or anything with the Russian, they said, all right, the president is the one that the Department of Justice works for, so he can make the final analysis, and so the president will review this and decide whether it will be released or not. Now, the House Intelligence Committee, being run by Republicans, vetoed the fact that the Democrats had said, if you're going to release this memo, you need to release the memo we've drafted that actually gives as good as yours to help the American public understand what's going on with this investigation. They said, no, we will not release the Democratic memo. We will release the Republican Devin Nunes and his people. Now, an interesting development to that, within the House Intelligence Committee's discussion, one of the Democrats asked Devin Nunes, Mr. Chairman, did you have any consultation with the White House when you drafted this memo? And his answer was, I can say now that, to my knowledge, no. Which means since he's recused himself, sure, he doesn't know what's going on. It was Quimbley or whatever his name is, the guy says to him, okay, so you didn't. Anybody on your staff have any contact with the White House when it came time to draft this memo about this supposedly whatever? Your time has run out. And so you get no answer. Right. So now there's a big question of, is this another one of these Devin Nunes and Devin Nunes staff running down to the White House to try to concoct another story to divert the actual investigation on the Russian influence Trump campaign collusion, Trump transition team collusion. Is this just another smokescreen? And so you were talking about one of the media outlets. Call up that media outlet just to put this in what other media organizations are actually talking about.
Mediaite?
Media, yeah, that. Yeah.
Well, their headline, I like their headline. The Memogate farce tells us far more about Trump, his cult, and the Russian investigation than the FBI, which is interesting. But I also wanted to ask you a question. Now, did Trump say today that he was going to release the memo? I know he was going to make some sort of an announcement today. I've not heard any news or seen anything. And my question further to that is, it's also been redacted. Who did the redaction, and what have they taken out?
And I was listening to the radio this morning before I came in, and the latest I have, we're taping on a Thursday, is that he would release it tomorrow.
Oh, I thought it today. It was today. I'm sorry.
Well, possibly. We don't know.
Well, he's speaking before that GOP thing in West Virginia.
The reason why they call it a farce is because first they theoretically cherry-picked the stuff to come up with an argument, and because the Democrats realized that that's what was going on, they said we can't let them get away with that. So members of that same Intelligence Committee, House, they drafted their memo and to correct the record, but that wasn't going to be let out. So then they asked to see the memo that was drafted just to double check that things were not going to get out of hand as far as letting things out of the bag that shouldn't be. And so they had someone from the FBI take a quick look at it or whatever. But the redaction you're talking about is that memo supposedly, after all this quick look, whatever, was then altered by Chairman Nunes. So the memo that went to the White House with whatever stuff is in the memo. And so that's why it's called a farce, because there's this, then there's this version, and then there's this version.
And that's what was spoken about on the radio this morning. The White House is looking at a version that's no longer accurate.
Right. That's been changed since the other intelligence people have looked at it.
Yet it's being worked on as we tape, which is astounding.
So it is really a farce, and it comes back to what we've been saying all along, that the big elephant in the room, and this is what, the day after the State of the Union address, which you're not even going to deal with, except peripherally, we're talking about this farce, because this actually is what's controlling the news cycle, not what idiot stuff was said in the State of the Union, which one of the other Democratic congressmen, I believe it was Gutierrez, got up and flat out said, I was hoping I could get through my term in Congress without an avowedly racist president in office, but it looks like I ran out of time. I'm quoting the man. I ran out of time, and because the thrust of that State of the Union message, as far as he was concerned, was he was back to calling all immigrants members of MS-13 and murderers and whatever. And so,
but the bigger story, and the one that I only saw one day in the press or heard about for one day, was Trump, which leads back to what we were talking about, Trump refusing to impose the sanctions on Russia after they've been passed by both houses.
Oh yeah. That which really should not be a one-day story, because
but it was.
Because if you look at the vote, I believe I didn't write it down, something like 98-2 in the Senate, and 468-3 in the House, that said, yes, they meddle in our elections, and yes, we need to put some kinds of punishment in place to let the Russians know that that is not acceptable. And that was the vote back last summer that then set a deadline for the White House and the Treasury Department and the State Department, because those are the people that impose sanctions on these foreign entities and individuals and governments, to put in place. And what you saw was, the day you saw it, the 24th, that was the deadline for the White House to make sure the Treasury Department and the State Department put those sanctions in place. And this is the laughable thing that I heard yesterday, last night, maybe early this morning. Somebody in Congress or the White House on the Trump team said, well, we don't have to put the sanctions in place. We voted to put them in place. And so that's as effective as putting them in place. Right. And I heard that. And, I know where I heard it. It was last night. Stephen Colbert decided he would do one of the comments on this bit. And this was his line. Oh, yes, that's like me sentencing this murderer to 25 years to life in prison. But now that I've sentenced you to 25 years in life to prison for murder, I can see that this sentence really has affected you, so don't bother going to jail. Right. I thought that was the best analogy I could have come up with. But this is your Congress at work. You voted to put these sanctions in place. This guy in the White House, who, let me say this one more time, because we haven't said it in 2018, I now am fully convinced that man isn't just a Manchurian candidate. He's a tool of the Russian government. The guy that's sitting in the White House, the president of this country, who refuses to put these sanctions in place for the people who meddle in our democratic elections, has to be a tool of the White House. That's why those sanctions are not in place. So I'm no longer saying he's a Manchurian candidate. I'm saying he's an agent for the Russian government. And if people don't start looking at him as such, we're missing the big story.
I think it's very clear that he is acting in their best interests, and has been all along. Your theory was that that's what this whole thing was about. The
investigation. Is he been co-opted? That's what the Russian investigation is all about.
But originally, that this whole thing started with Trump. Trump's main goal in the White House was to lift these sanctions.
That's what he started from the time he took office.
Exactly. Now, I think that was going on during the
transition.
During the transition, during the
Mike Flynn got burnt because he told the Russians, "Oh, don't worry about those sanctions. We'll get them lifted as soon as we're in office."
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And that's what they're working on.
No, I mean,
clearly,
I don't think he's looking out for their best interests. I think he's looking out for
his own best
and
interests.
his own best interests has theirs tied in with it.
Because he has no loyalty to anybody.
Go ahead. I'll listen.
I mean, a good friend of mine is a magician, and the whole art of magic is misdirection.
Yep.
And the whole thing is to have you looking at my glasses while I pick your wallet and while I take your watch.
That's exactly what we're doing.
I'm lucky. It's good that part of our media is not being fooled by this misdirection, but a big chunk of this country is. A big chunk of this country just eats what he says, accepts it as fact, and when he says, this is the memo that's good for you, a big chunk of the nation is going to take that as and a big chunk of the conservative press. I don't even want to hear about what Fox is going to say about it, because we know it's going to be garbage. But a big part of this country is just going to eat it up and as if it was morning breakfast, and not understand the underlying misdirection.
And shame on the media for not digging deeper behind this.
Right.
And they're following this also. I mean, it's selling newspapers. People are tuning in.
It's getting clicks, which is my problem. They go for the news that gets the clicks, and they don't want to dig because it takes too much work.
Yeah, we were talking a little about this in the last show about, are there hard journalists who are following the story, who are digging into it, who are not getting distracted by the shiny object, as our good friend Pearl would say. Yes. But the print media, Washington Post, New York Times, even the Wall Street Journal, which is actually still, I believe, Rupert Murdoch owned, but some of their stories have been shockingly good and in-depth based on the fact that I can't put any attention to what the New York Post says. I don't pay any attention to any other Murdoch stuff like Fox News. But the Wall Street Journal, somebody in there is still deciding that they're still a newspaper
I think they're still
quality.
credible journalists.
And so they're breaking really in-depth investigative stories about what's going on. And all these latest stuff, from Nunes and his memo to Paul Ryan saying, yes, we will go ahead and let Nunes, as what's the right-leaning columnist for the Washington Post, Jennifer Rubin, said on somebody's show. He said, This is now a collusive House of Representatives. They are basically enabling this man. The fact that they allow this clandestine memo, stuff that should not be out in the general public, to be released just because it's going to help this president who's under investigation, says that all this parallel to Watergate and Howard Baker and all these other Republicans who stood up and made sure Richard Nixon did not succeed in killing the rule of law in this country, none of that exists in today's Republican Congress or Senate. And people need to, and I'm paraphrasing here, they need to stop looking for the Howard Bakers of today to step up, because it's not going to happen. And the only thing that's going to save this attempted democracy if the people light a fire and vote these people out of office. That's basically it. There is no more checks and balances. You're not waiting for the House and the Senate to come to the rescue of the people, because you have an autocratic guy who has no respect for the rule of law in office right now.
I'm waiting for him to hang somebody out to dry who's going to turn around and spill the beans. Now, you say there is no Howard Baker. There's no voluntary Howard Baker today, but he's going to screw with the wrong person in his inner circle.
I'm not waiting for him to screw
I
anybody.
wouldn't wait for it either, but it's bound to happen.
We can't wait for him
I
to screw the wrong person.
I understand
okay?
that.
We can't do 3 more years like this.
No.
That we can't do. This is
yeah.
way
I don't
too
want to
much.
do another year like this.
This investigation that they're trying to stymie, let's go back to the heart of this investigation, because it's really Bob Mueller, special counsel, that they're trying to torpedo. They're trying to stop his investigation. And they're trying all kinds of, the memo is supposed to be making folks like Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General,
yeah.
supposedly be in cahoots with a quote Comey group. It's supposed to be in cahoots with whomever in the Justice Department, not Ray, but McCabe. McCabe being the assistant to the deputy, or the acting assistant to the director of the FBI, right? Because Ray is they've had musical chairs so much we're losing track.
Yeah.
But Charles Ray is the current FBI director who replaced Comey. McCabe was the deputy to him, and because McCabe was working in his stead till he got appointed and confirmed, McCabe is now trying to be thrown under the bus by the Trump people. All the people that could corroborate Comey's story about the fact that the president tried to get him to go easy on Mike Flynn, which is an obvious obstruction of justice.
Right.
Anybody that can corroborate that story in the FBI has been neutered, pushed out, or fired. Comey's fired, McCabe just forced to resign, and now they're going after Rod Rosenstein, okay?
And some of these people, even just for family reasons, don't want to deal with this, and they just want to duck. They want to get away from this. And he's poked at Rosenstein before and gotten his finger burned. So I'm not sure how hard he's going to push there.
You see, it's so convoluted.
It
is just.
I'm glad you explained it, because some of the names are floating in my head like alphabet soup.
It is just totally convoluted. But because we are who we are, and it's our job as quote media watch to try to keep an eye on this and try to analyze this stuff, we have to keep saying, all right, what's the real story that they're trying to distract us from? And the real story is, did the Russians do something to the elections? Yes, because that's why the sanctions were voted. It was proven. Did the Trump people collude with the Russians to help do something in the elections one way or the other? The answer actually is yes, because you've got all these actual documented evidence, like the emails between Donald Trump Jr., it's Don Jr., correct? Not Eric?
Jr.,
who said to the Russian go-between, oh, you got dirt on Hillary? We'd love that.
Right.
Let's have this meeting and get together and talk about how we can make this work and whatever. I'm paraphrasing,
Sure.
but that's definite evidence of collusion. Now, the problem is collusion is not necessarily a crime, but if you get gain from some foreign power in the course of getting yourself elected, that is a crime. The bit about that's in-kind service, that's money or in-kind goods of value, and you can't take anything from a foreign government that impacts an election, okay? And so that's what they're now trying to prove about the, quote, collusion, but the bigger story is, it's always the biggest story. It wasn't the collusion or the crime of colluding or cooperating, it's the obstruction of the investigation. And that is the bugaboo that's got the Republicans all riled up and's got Nunes doing whatever backflips, whatever jumping over that he's trying to do with his fake memos, and Paul Ryan saying, yeah, release the memo, and a whole bunch of online hashtag release the memo, which I saw a quote was retweeted 238,000% by Russian bots. Okay? So that tells you your Memogate farce is what this is all about.
All right, we have about 1:45, but when the memo, if the memo comes out on Friday, you're going to have to put on your opinion, your op-ed hat for the moment, but what should the public do once the memo comes out and says this person is part of the crew that's trying to undermine the administration? What should the public do with that information if it comes out?
They should rise up in arms and demand they be removed from office and prosecuted if need be. That's what they should do. Now, will they do that? I don't know. The question is, what will the press do about how they cover this? See, part of the issue is who spins what. The memo they're trying to craft, somebody called it the Spin Memo. I laughed when I saw that term. I said, actually, that's pretty good.
That's deadly accurate, though.
That's pretty good. The Spin Memo says what it is. And so then, how do you read between that, or not read between it, but nail it down that people understand that it's a Spin Memo?
Right.
Nail it down that the general public who don't want to wade between all these confusing
And they don't
things,
have the time.
and because obfuscation is part of the game. Attacking the credible institutions is the game. So when the actual verdict comes down, if they've already said they can't be trusted, then the actual verdict will be thrown out like it doesn't matter. So we're out of time?
25 seconds.
Yeah, okay. Look, we spent more time just rehashing the memo as opposed to other stories, but you know what? Sometimes you have to do that. This has been Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony.
And I'm Raymond Peterson.
And you should check us out on YouTube.
At Media Watch EVT, which is also our new Twitter handle.
All right, Media Watch EVT. And we'll catch you the next time.